Good evening. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Board of Finance meeting for Monday, August 20th, 2018 to order. As is usual, first item on the agenda is public forum. Anyone wishing to address the board in public forum? I will take a moment, if I could, to take an opportunity that you may notice over the next couple of months that to my immediate right, our colleague Ken Gamerman is not going to be with us. Probably for a couple months. He unfortunately had a fall. He's doing well. I saw him yesterday. I can tell you he is just as passionate about Board of Finance material as you would think he might be. In fact, maybe a little bit more so because he can't be here. So I have a pad of all of Ken's notes that he has shared with me. So I will be, I don't know if I'll be asking any of my own questions. I think they're going to be mostly Ken's questions. But we met yesterday and he's in very good spirits, but I just want to let everyone know that he is currently at home in therapy and he's doing well, but it'll probably be a long road for him. But our thoughts are all with him on behalf of the board.
Speedy recovery.
Item number 2, approve minutes of the regular meeting minutes of July 16th. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments, corrections?
I was in attendance, so I would add my name to the attendance. I'm noted as having voted many times, but I'm not noted as being in attendance. So.
I'm glad you confirmed that, because I looked at it and I thought, wait a minute. There were a couple of items in the minutes about correspondence that I believe I wrote down. I know the energy performance contract report, the list of projects in process that was shared with everyone. I received that a couple of days after our last meeting, so I forwarded that on to everyone. So everyone should have received it. It was dated 7/17 actually, so probably about 25 projects on it in process. Any other comments, corrections? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain? Okay. Item number 3, correspondence. Number 1, Standing Building Committee minutes. So the Standing Building Committee caught up this month. We had minutes from July 10th, which was their regular meeting, August 2nd special meeting, and August 7th. That was our regular meeting. As you may recall, the July 10th meeting was later than usual, so they weren't able to get those meeting minutes to us. So we are caught up. I was not able to attend those meetings, but I've read through everything. I know that there's several questions that I had from our esteemed colleague, Mr. Gamerman, that I will try to pass off. But why don't I ask if anybody has any questions? I'm not going to necessarily go through them all. If I was going to do anything, I would look at August because that's the latest one. Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns?
I have a really general question, Mike,
Sure.
And it's about the performance contracting.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that the building committee is starting to look at where we're at and what pieces of the project are done. And I'm wondering when we're going to get some data about any savings.
Savings probably will take a little while. It's probably going to take a good year, just to monitor. Maybe a few months, maybe at the earliest 4 to 5 months to really monitor what's going on. A lot of it seems to be lighting projects, and so that's going to take a little effect.
Now with lighting 80% done, I'm
Right.
looking to see
So the question
some
is how
decrease
much-
in the electric bill
Right.
at this point.
So, and that's something that I think that would be good to monitor. I'm almost certain that Mr. Gurnham, facility director, will be able to
just a general
give us that
question,
information and provide some
Yeah,
data.
and maybe we can start pressing them as to when we'll start seeing some of the analysis on the savings.
I agree. I believe that a lot of the work is being done this summer. So with the work being done this summer, hate to speculate, but I would think October, November, we should start getting some data back as far as energy savings. But as we saw, there's a huge list of items that was that were in process. So
Yep.
they just highlighted the bigger ones in the minutes. So. I guess this is a good chance because it went in front of the building committee. I'm sure we all read the turf field comments and the extent of that. What I can tell you is that as we read, and for the public who's watching this, the cold temperatures that occurred in December and January certainly had a lot to do with it. But there was some, I think, installation issues with the way that the pad was laid out, and that helped the issue of the field spreading at the turf. And there was also some poorly draining base that, because of the way the pad was laid out, the drains didn't work the way they were supposed to. Matt, I don't know if you want to mention anything, because I know you are keeping a pulse on this, the latest, but right now, if I'm not mistaken, the consultants, the design consultants, the contractors are all in the process of trying to work out a solution and trying to come up with not just a design solution to fix it, but also a financial solution that will not cost the town a dime because it's under warranty.
Mike, you're correct. Last
Yep.
week we issued the final report from Castle Booze. We had a preliminary report which we shared with the Standing Building Committee. I was actually at their August 7th meeting, and they seemed impressed with the conclusions that were reached. They significant number of questions, but Castle Booze is very confident in the analysis and the testing that was done at the sports lab, the lab that they used. So that final report, after it was blessed by our attorney, went to the 6 partners. And the partners, as you may recall, include the engineering firm that designed it. And you just mentioned a couple of considerations that would include the engineering firm, as well as the manufacture of the various components, and then the installation, some questions about the installation. That group has been charged with coming up with a solution, an agreement amongst themselves. Failing to do that, we'll proceed to the next step, which will be some form of litigation. But we are hopeful that they will come to some kind of agreement with Castle Booze, identify that the appropriate parties who have a piece in it. And there is some speculation that there are 3 or 4 different pieces, so it could be spread across those contractors. The last thing that those contractors want to see is they also don't want to see litigation, because their reputations in the industry could be besmirched to some degree. There are already a couple other cases out there that they're concerned about. So,
Yeah, I think it's a really good point for us and, again, the public, because the questions still remain, well, why can't you just fix it temporarily? And I know that there are a couple of communities that we read about. I think it was Bristol, Connecticut, Bristol and Holyoke, that had similar issues with the fields that they are, I guess, temporarily patching, but they're really looking at us as the model, because we have a consultant who's done the laboratory tests, because whatever we come up with our team is going to be something that gets followed by other fields that have the same issue. It looks like, according to this. So
the Standing Fields Committee, our consultant Castle Booze, as well as our Jeff D'Onofrio, our attorney, and I all agree that a remediation for the affected areas does not ensure that it is not going to happen elsewhere on the carpet, or there's already weakening or potential. The big problem is the pad has created gaps. There's a pad and underlayment it's an interlocking underlayment. That's what provides the cushion. That has separated, and we may not be able, without doing pulling back the entire carpet, we don't know where if there are other separations. So going in and doing a remediation on 1 or 3, 4 areas is, we think, a fool's errand. So at this point, the recommendation from Castle Booze is to take the field up in its entirety, address the drainage issue, and then the appropriate reinstallation of the pad and a new turf. So they'll be able to, about the only piece that they'll be able to retain the pad, save for the pieces that were damaged, and probably 75 to 80% of the infill. The
It's the infrastructure in the underlay.
Right. And the infrastructure stays, obviously.
Okay. So if anybody wants to read any of the standing building, I know they're probably going to be posted. So there's quite a bit of detail in the discussion that happened there. So just wanted to do a high level. All the projects seem to be on schedule, budget. Leet Septic is going to, the Leet Septic may already be halfway done.
Already started.
It's already started, yeah, and that's like a
They were
week
working
and a half project.
They were working the very day that we signed the contract.
Yeah, I knew it was an immediate. So the only thing, I want to go back real quick to the performance contracting because Mr. Gammerman had a question regarding the total amounts. We're doing a little bit of investigation on what we've paid to pay Johnson Controls to date. It was $721,000, I think, this past warrant. The one before was about $823,000, and there was a payment, I think, initially that I want to recall was about $500,000. That was a kind of get them started. Maybe that was requisition number one.
It was 30% of the project.
Okay.
The first payment.
Was it okay? So it was a much larger amount.
I don't have that information with me. Sorry.
The question that came from Mr. Gammerman is, do we feel so far, does the building committee and do the leaders of the town feel that we're getting what we're paying for?
There's a schedule that we contracted for.
Okay.
It's not a question of are we getting what we paid for at this point. There is a schedule for both payments and the installation of the components.
Right.
We're comfortable that they're moving along in terms of
At the pace of the
meeting
state.
their goals.
Okay. Good.
In fact, they've been through town hall for the last couple of weeks with the various changes they're making to the infrastructure.
Anybody else have anything on standing building to bring up or any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I apologize if this question doesn't make any sense, but I was just curious, for the turf field, we're looking for a remedy of repair or replacement. Would we ever consider a remedy of converting back to a traditional field?
At this point, that is not on the table.
No? Okay.
Be nice to get what we paid for.
Yeah.
We believe we have the leverage over the contractors or all of the contractors because of the faulty installation design and/or material. So if we were to just say, oh, we'd have to pursue a legal remedy anyway.
Good. That was it.
All right. If nothing else on building committee, we'll move on to the pension committee minutes. So question, I'll just start again from Mr. Gammerman regarding the, I guess on the second page, monthly investment report talks about moving half of Anchor to Vanguard funds, and then it says the process went smoothly with Wells Fargo advisors, and the question was, how are we doing through that process? What's the status? I see that Robert Hartman is here, so you can always provide some feedback as well. So.
A new team of colleagues are representing the old team from Wells. They're coming down. They've picked up where the old team left off. They have a set of new recommendations, primarily regarding fixed income, which is fine. But in the end, it means not that much because we've gone out to tender for applications to bid. We've had 11 responses. And so the selection committee will consider the responses between now and we'll meet on the 13th or 14th of September to make recommendations to the entire committee. So it's going well. We're communicating very well with them. The nature of reporting to us is unchanged, but we can anticipate kind of an upgrade going forward. We may stay with them, we may not.
Okay. But it's still going through the process. And
yeah.
and 11 bids, so that's good. It's not the amount. Good. Anything else on pension committee?
Just one question. Has there been any more discussion about the assumption rate?
They volunteered, they want to drop it to 6.5, that's where we are anyway. If we went any faster than that, John, it would be a little disruptive to the process. It's tempting to get out ahead of it, but we're not trying to time the market, we're playing the long-term ball here, so we will be dropping the rate at the next meeting.
Am I confusing some of the rates here, Bob? Is
We did.
the assumption rate at 5 now?
It doesn't go into effect. Sorry, it doesn't. We've dropped it. It just doesn't go into effect until the next cycle.
The pension committee voted at its last meeting last Wednesday to drop the assumption rate to 6.5%. That will go in effect for the fiscal 2019-2020 budget.
Right.
And will be used by Milliman in all of their calculations. The net effect, there were a couple of things that were done. Milliman gave us a report regarding using actual salary data as opposed to some assumption sets that they've been using for a while, and the drop of the rate to 6.5%. And the net effect was about $200,000 all in additional contributions that would be required from the town, and that's before the June 30th valuation. So moving from 6 3/4 to 6.5, and truing up against the salaries is about a $200,000 net increase to pension contributions for next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Pension. Okay, moving on. Item number 4. Review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education. So this is the 1 month that we get to go through 2 fiscal years. So we're going to do this with the Board of Education, then we'll do it with the town somewhat. On the town, we're just going to do the warrants for this year, for this fiscal year. So, Linda, Ben, how are you?
Well, how are you all doing?
Good, very good.
So I'm
Welcome to, I believe this is your first reporting.
my first reporting, yes.
We'll be kind, maybe.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so we'll go first through fiscal year 2017-18. And
So we have,
Ben, what would you like to bring up to us?
so our total appropriations, as you know, for 2017-18 was $58,650,136. And as of last week, or since last week, I should say, we realized some additional expenses and credits. So the adjusted total expenditures now reads at $696,726.38. So that's the revised amount that we're asking for the town to approve. The warrant for July was $681,773.47, which I looked through very carefully. Got lots of answers to my questions from Terry, and was wondering if you had any questions about the warrant.
Go ahead.
Electricity on the expenses. It looks like it's down substantially from the last year. Do you think that's going to be indicative of next year as well, or is
Is that the high school?
Well, it's the whole
okay.
electricity line.
Well, so one thing that I had noticed for Eversource on the bottom of page 4 was,
On the warrant.
Oh, I'm not on the warrants. I'm sorry.
oh,
Electricity, we do think that this is where it's going to trend, and hopefully even lower with some of the energy performance contracting stuff. The high school has come in under budget.
yeah.
We were still trying to work our way through what the new building and what the electricity was going to be. We did in the budget for 1819 reduce the electricity budget based on what we were seeing for trends. So it does seem to have gone down.
Great.
Yeah, and that's why I had noticed when I was looking at the warrant, the $25,000 for the month was less than what was budgeted, so I thought that was a good sign.
Yeah, no, that is.
All right, while we're on the stuff that's running over, can I ask about computer software? I think early on I thought it was a timing issue, but it looks like at the end of the year we are spending a little more on computers, significant amount more on computer software than we thought.
So there was a transfer done of $100,000 out of that account, which I probably should have split it out amongst other accounts in that grouping.
Okay.
So really,
We're not that far off.
no, it's about, we're actually about
We're actually
$25,000
$25
under
plus.
budget.
Okay,
Yes.
under budget, excuse me. All right, I follow you.
Actually, John, I'll build off of that. One of the questions that I have in my notes here is regarding the lower spending, actually, in supplies and materials. And I believe, based on that spending, Mr. Gammerman actually had some questions regarding, seeing that the transfers of about $200,000 out of that. Basically, the question was, how did it affect students? Where were the cuts made? And why were where were the sacrifices to that? And if those two were the big, computer software and building and teaching, and there was another one I think that was somewhat lower. Custodial, I think, was the other one that was lower. So all of those were much lower than the full expenditure. So just there was curiosity on where
the building and teaching, there wasn't a request that came across my desk that we didn't approve, as long as it was truly something reasonable.
Right.
The schools just didn't request it. At the end of the year, when given the option of, did they need supplies or equipment, most of the schools said, we need equipment, we need furniture, we need to replace outdated instruments or replace instruments. So the schools chose to spend some available money out of equipment instead of classroom stuff. There wasn't any classroom item that was requested that we didn't buy.
The question might be maybe more, there was absolutely no directive, or it just happened to be one of those years that the requests weren't there and it was just lower. Actually, it was a benefit because we were able to transfer into other overages.
The only directive that was given to the building principals was that at the start of the year, we wanted not to expend more than 50% of their budget, so that if there was a shortage, we had some money to go back to. If they needed it for instructions, we purchased it. Kind of thinking, okay, first semester items, second semester items. In the second half after December, January, they were able to buy the rest of the materials they needed to get them through the rest of the year.
Makes sense.
That line is split out between probably 30 different accounts. A couple of them are over, some of them are under, a couple are under a little bit more. Our district account is under. We bought the stuff we needed. If we didn't need it, we ordered up on paper at the end of the year before, so we didn't order paper for a while. It just, we didn't see any need to spend it down when we didn't need it.
What is David M. Myers?
He is a social worker. It's a contracted services for people services.
So if there are two line items for him, each line has 5 dates on it. Presumably those are the dates that the services were provided. But one of the invoices is $2,000 and one is $8,000.
His billing is split between working with a program, set hours in the school, and then brought in for specific students. So the billing is split out. And off the top of my head, I don't remember what is what. I could go back and look at it in a little bit more detail. I also want to be careful about talking about services
So
provided.
these dates that are on here, those are invoices as opposed to dates of service then?
It's a date of service on probably a list of, on an invoice. I'd have to go back and look for sure.
I just don't understand if it's the same number of days, why one is 4 times more than the other. Unless he had 4 times as many people there, or does he have a different rate for
No,
different services?
I think it's a difference between whether he's providing it for the group or for individuals, but I can look at a little more detail. I don't want to.
And then the other thing was the Halverson Psychiatric, which I think is a name that's been on here before, right? But I don't usually see them billing us for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months at a time.
I had to beg for those. The billing was just really far behind, and I said that if they didn't get the billing in, that our fiscal year was going to be closed, and I wasn't sure if we'd be able to pay the invoices because we closed the year, and so she finally got her billing caught up.
Okay.
It seems weird to have to beg for bills, but
Right,
I did.
it does.
It's, yeah.
It happens.
Linda, can we talk about the site improvement line a
Sure.
little bit that went over? Do you know what drove that?
So most of that was the Adams work that was done last summer with the moving of classrooms and the air handling that had to be done in the other area. So most of that was spent a long time ago. And then there was, I'm trying to think, so we also added in there the oil tank removal
Yep.
and
I think I remember that, yeah.
repiping, so that one,
That was a little unexpected, right?
we had a little bit of funds, so we paid for it out of last year. And so that project is being funded out of last year, for the oil tank removal up at Jones, and then the repiping of the new tank.
Okay.
And then there's some site work or some outside work that's being done at Lathrop House. I believe was one of the added projects to that at the end of the year.
Okay. I was wondering what some of the drivers were.
On the tuition line item, in looking at the numbers, and I know we've had this discussion before, but I guess when you see the transfer, brought it a little bit more question. We had a budget of 2.6 and we ended up transferring because we were over, and it was about, call it 3.1 million. The budget we have for this fiscal year is 2.3? I think it's 2.3. But there's basically what we had budgeted for this fiscal year versus last was a difference of about $375,000, and we had a transfer of $475 or something. So it's like an $800,000 swing. However, I do know that there have been changes in the students, some graduating out of the students, and there's been some savings.
Right.
I'm just wondering if you could comment on the comfortability of where things stand now after that transfer with our budget this year, and knowing the fluctuations.
Right.
Totally
So,
get that.
well, the very first time I looked at it for next year, thought we're in pretty good shape. Right before last Monday's Board of Ed meeting, I was notified of 3 outplacements. One of them is out of state. One of them is to a facility that we are already using. We already have other students there, so that'll save us on the transportation. But the tuition, I'm not sure exactly what that tuition is going to be. And the other one is, the tuition alone is about $70,000. But in next year's, I'm still wrong years. In the 18-19 budget, we added $250,000 for additional outplacements. In the 17-18 budget, we only had $100,000. So I'm hoping that this is going to be, we're still going to be okay. I have not done a tuition report yet. I really need to I'm still working on getting updated costs from all the facilities, and so I will have one for next month's meeting with an idea of, what we have for outplacements, what the costs are going to be. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
And we knew this could, I mean, it's not a surprise.
No.
This is the
Budget
way,
one.
yeah, August comes in
Mhm.
sometimes, one way and sometimes another. So, okay. Anybody else on, we're kind of all over the place at this point. Warrants,
Yes.
the meeting notes, meeting minutes. I know that there was a question I had about special ed transportation. Just wondering how that all worked out, the final result. I know that they were in review and they were in review at the time that these minutes were, that's all been finalized? The contracts, everything's all set?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who did it end up with, the current vendor or the?
No, for the special ed transportation, the new vendor for our regular transportation didn't want to take any of the runs because they wanted to make sure that they could meet our needs for the regular transportation without taking on any more this year. So it went back out to some of the vendors that we've used in the past. And most of those transportations haven't started yet. And schools don't start until more along the lines of ours, closer to next week. But the bids that we received for the special ed transportation, it's fairly close to the prices that we've had currently, so we're hoping that that should work out as well.
Anything else on warrants, minutes, expenditures? Now I know that the question, I guess, is when we want to discuss this. But I know that there's also the pension, the medical benefits, and the pension transfer. I don't know when we necessarily, when we want to bring this up, whether we do it during our medical report, or we talk about it now, or. I know on the pension, the transfer that occurred with the versus, not going into the medical, but going into the pension. I did want to state that the first selectman and chairman of the Board of Education and I met regarding the transfer that took place, was approved by the Board of Education. Chairman Bloss is here, so Bill, I don't know if you want to come up and address that decision. And I think that after we met, I think the idea is it makes a lot of sense to do what was done. I think the process is what was the question. So I basically said to both Bill and Matt, especially Bill, could you try to come to our meeting so we could have just a discussion about it? And again, I don't think there's anybody on this board that would necessarily have an issue with the way that, with the act of putting the money from the medical into the pension. The question is the process that I think we talked about, and whether or not it should have come before the Board of Finance at some point in the process. And so this is the discussion. We just want to, it's more of a transparency communication issue, I believe. So Bill, if you want to talk about how, what the discussions that the Board of Ed had and how everything transpired.
And we did talk about it actually as part of the budget preparation process for the 18-19 budget, that this was among the possibilities, depending on how the year played out. But, and I've made this observation before with you that we are, and when we were talking about the electricity line, it's a little bit comparable. We're preparing our budget for presentation to you 6 months before the end of the fiscal year that we're in. Sometimes it's 4 months into the fiscal year when the administration starts to develop its budget. So we really don't have the kind of history with some of the budget lines that we would like to have when we're preparing our budget request for the next fiscal year. At the time that we were in the development of the 18-19 budget, I believe we did say that at least our experience in 17-18 on the medical line was better than we had anticipated. And partly it's all due to a lot of things. We made some very good decisions, if I may say so, and I just did, on the stop-loss provisions of our health insurance policy. That is something that we have really made a commitment to, and our experience with it. And I should explain what the stop-loss provision is. It just says that when there are certain very large claims, that those very large claims go back into a traditional health insurance policy for which we pay a premium rather than through the self-insurance, as most of our claims are paid. And so some years that makes sense to do, some years it doesn't make sense to do. And unfortunately, you have to pay the premium before you know what kind of a year it's going to be. But just as it's turned out, the last couple of years, it has saved the town hundreds of thousands of dollars over what the expenses. It's not exactly a benefit, frankly, to be paying a large medical bill. Somebody doesn't want to have that benefit or expenditure, but in any event, that has saved the town hundreds of thousands of dollars. We did meet, the first selectman and I and Dr. Freeman and Joe Spurgeon, our consultant from, I guess he's not from Milliman anymore, he's on his own, I believe. But he indicated that our health fund is in very good shape. Now recognizing, it's not that long ago, and I'm sure Ms. Wallace remembers, we were in a pretty deep hole. Yeah, we were significantly behind 3 or 4 years ago, and acted responsibly, and now got it into a situation where we do have some funds in it that are probably more than is needed under even the most conservative budget and projection estimates in that particular line. So the Board of Education, and I can give you the narrow lawyer answer, which of course I'm going to do because under state statute, the appropriated money to the Board of Education is solely up to the Board of Education to spend. And the general statutes give the Board of Education the sole discretion to make budget transfers, as long as we report to the Board of Selectmen that we've done it, and after the fact, and which we do obviously by means of the minutes. Having said that, I want to offer the kind of broader cooperative board chair approach on it. I think it is a good idea to at least flag to the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen that we are considering it. I think part of it is a bit of a timing issue. We didn't think that we were going to do it until the June meeting. And then we would meet with you after the June meeting. And so under almost any scenario, our vote is going to precede any meeting with you unless we're so confident that we would appear in the May meeting and say, well, this is what we believe we're going to do. We could do that. I think that's a fair point, and there's absolutely no reason not to do it. I don't think this is going to be an every year situation either, by the way. We do make budget transfers among our 7 broad budget categories every single year, and we report them to you after they've been done. And that is clearly something that in a $58 million budget, that's just going to happen. That has to happen. And so the budget, as our old colleague Mr. Potocny would say, a budget is nothing more than a series of estimates, and the estimates are always off. Some are high, some are low. We don't know where some of these numbers are going to wind up, but they are good faith projections, and sometimes we do very well, and sometimes, as with special ed outplacements, it's much, much harder to predict. So if your thought is that it would be good to the maximum extent possible, present this before the Board of Education votes, I have no quarrel with that at all. I don't think the Board of Education has any quarrel with it at all. The Board of Education voted unanimously to do this. It struck us as the most responsible and frankly fiscally conservative thing to do, in that we were actually under a little bit of, we did have some inquiries from people about, well, why don't you use this to add school buses to go to a 2 bus run. Well, the problem is you can't use something like this one-time savings for recurring budget expenses. That's one way. That's one way among many that the state of Connecticut got in such trouble, and we were pretty confident that we didn't want to do that. So this will allow us to reduce the unfunded part of the pension program by about a third. That will lead to taxpayer relief in years moving forward because we will be able to to reduce that contribution. We have about, I think it's 12 years or so to make up the remaining balance of approximately $2 million. We're already on track to do that with what our budgeted amounts are right now. So we're in good shape. So that's, I guess that's a long answer to your short question, but that's why we did it and what we would propose to do moving forward.
The 2 points I think I just want to make is, well, first of all, we found out about this in July, and as you know, as we all know, the meeting minutes and the discussions and everything that happens with the Board of Education happens, we get the minutes so much further, later on. So I guess the argument could be made that we would have known this a lot earlier if we were all attending the Board of Education meetings, right? It would just make sense because there's such a delay in getting all the minutes to the Board of Finance just because of the meeting timing. It's very difficult. We're looking at, all the notes that we're looking at right now are back in July, and we're in August 20th. So there's a bit of a delay there. So to your credit, I would say, yeah, you all found, determined to do this in June, but we didn't find out until July. But if we were at the meetings in June, we would have known. So we would have known literally a month earlier anyway. So there's a bit of delay in the communication, and that's no fault of anybody except that it's just the timing of our meetings are just, that's the way they work.
I think if I'd have to look it up, but I think it was on our agenda. So it was not secret by any stretch of the imagination.
And I'm not saying it was. I'm saying that, we're focused on the Board of Finance issues, and then we get all the correspondence literally a month delayed. And that's just the timing of the meetings. Again, it's not because drafts aren't sent out. It's just the timing. I think part of also what I heard and what some of the concern was is I don't think anybody on this board we completely agree that we are accepting the expenditures of the board, and you have every right to make any transfer and do anything that you in terms of the allocations because of the state statute, right? Except that when it comes to the medical, there's a mix of town and school employees in that. And I guess my understanding is that if it's just a Board of Education expenditure, that's one thing. But when it goes into a medical account where it mixes the town and the school, there might be a little bit more, might be a little bit of issue. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I think that's two different things.
Okay.
I think that if the point is, if we on the Board of Education voted to have somebody, whoever the custodian of the medical account is, transfer money out of that into our account, into the Board of Education budget, then I'd agree that is clearly not something that we'd be able to do, because once we pay into the account, it is not under our at least immediate authority. I think the difference is, though, before the payment is made into the account, and because that's just a budget amount, it is the money that was appropriated to the Board of Education can be transferred among various budget lines. So I think and again, I want to emphasize, I'm not suggesting that this is something we would do every year. I hope we can, frankly. In some respects, we have, I think, in many of the past several years, we have turned money into the town at the end to go into the fund balance. We don't ask for anybody's permission to do that, obviously, and that is just something that happens because of reasonable budgeting and spending practices. But I think, and again, I don't want to get technical, because I think we are all cooperative in terms of good management from both the town side and the Board of Ed side. But I think that there is a distinction between funds that are currently in the account and funds that aren't in the account.
Can I make a point as well?
Jonathan, go ahead, and then Jonathan. Then.
So Bill, your point is well taken, that it's completely within the purview of the Board of Education to use its capital apportionment as it will, as it wills. But I was thinking the same thing that Mike says, and I'm kind of repeating the point, I think, and that is that because you're so tightly and jointly involved in the contracting with the health administrator and to finance our healthcare plan with the town, that some kind of collaboration might be warranted.
Well, and there was. We did meet with the administrator or the consultant, and this was clearly one of the items that we talked about at that meeting. This is not something the Board of Ed would just do on its own, say, surprise. This is something that we are going to do to take money out of the medical account. We are confident, after meeting with Mr. Spurgeon, that the medical account is adequately funded at this point. And we're not going to do anything to put that account at risk. I've lived that already. All right, there was a time not that long ago that we were in a substantial deficit in that account. We're not going to do that again. And so I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it. But I think that probably what we need to do is just be try to the extent we can do it, to try to raise these issues 30 to 60 days before they have to get voted on by our board, so that everybody is just aware of what the alternatives are and what the possibilities are. Now, and if anything had come out that this is threatening the vitality of the medical account, obviously we wouldn't do it. We would not do it. But that is just not the situation that we're in right now.
Well, when we look at the town side of this and we look at the medical benefits report, we see it every month,
Yeah.
and we see where it is, and it's very healthy. So, that's not a concern at all that there would be any jeopardizing of that. Matt?
I just want to reiterate that the three of us did have an opportunity to sit down and meet, and I was one of the folks that I think I brought it to your attention that this was happening at one of your meetings, and I expressed some concern that we ought to have a more robust discussion and agreement between all three parties about the use of that money. I will also agree with Chairman Bloss that the Board of Education in no way has endangered the town relative to its posture with the medical account. In fact, he may have done us a favor because we have been discussing how best to utilize some of those excess funds in the account. When we met with Mr. Spurgeon and a group, they had given us a factor. I think it was 2.5 million, two times our monthly expenditure, which would be 2.5 million to remain in the account. We were having discussions about how much could we use for one-time events. Harken back to the budget season when we talked about doing something very similar to that. Jonathan and Ken, I think both of you have brought up, why can't we use some of the excess fund balance to shore up the pensions so we don't have to make those kind of contributions out of the operating budget, those make-up contributions. Well, this is clearly an example of being able to do that and able to do it without having to move the money from the from the healthcare account into the pension account. They basically took care of that for us. I will, because I have to mention this, part of the rationale for having a discussion, a larger discussion between all three boards, was that the Board of Selectmen might have opted to do the same thing, as we made our $200,000 contribution, and clearly the fund didn't need that as well, in as much as it didn't need the $900,000. So I think it makes sense for us all to be on the same page, and when we make these decisions, collectively, or not necessarily collectively, the Board of Education has the right to do what they want, but as it relates to this account, doing it in a collaborative fashion, I think makes an awful lot of sense to me. I'm thrilled that the Board of Education has significantly impacted the funding levels, will be impacting the funding levels of their pension, because it has dropped a little bit over the last couple of years. So this is a demonstrated commitment on the Board of Education's part to rectify that situation.
And as just looking at the medical benefits, even right now where we're standing is over $1 million over that estimation of our 3.6.
We might want to talk to you about some of that a little later tonight.
Okay. Look forward to it. All right. Anything else for fiscal year 17-18?
So I don't know if we
Because we
gave you a final number for 17-18 where we actually end up with an unexpended balance. So we end up with an unexpended balance of $5,850.35.
I thought I read it someplace and I thought it was under 10,000. So
Yes.
I did read it correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is the revised number.
And it was a challenging year.
It was a challenging year.
It was challenging.
Had to move some money around, but that was
Yes.
a tight
Yep.
budget.
Yes, it was a little tight.
Well, it may be that amount, but it's still a job well done. So.
If I can just note one other non-budget related thing, we've got preliminary enrollment numbers for our 18-19 year, and
Good segue. Perfect.
yeah.
We're going 18-19.
We budgeted for a reduction in enrollment of 70 or 100 students. Right now, we're down about 70 from last year, but we're still 2 months away, almost 2 months away from the last date to count. So that's October 1st. So that number's only going to go down, obviously. It's so we're going to once again wind up probably in practical terms largely flat.
Did I hear, and again, just correct me if I'm wrong, the kindergarten classes are pretty much stable? There was
Close to
no real
stable.
drop. And the drop really in the 100 students was we had a very large, did we have a large senior class?
We had a pretty
graduating?
large high school class, yes.
It was a larger than,
Yeah, we're just not seeing the enrollment declines that some of our regional communities are seeing.
no.
And you can speculate as to why, but that continues to be the case.
Great, thank you for that. So wait a minute. Before we move on to 17-18, to 18-19, we have to do a little acceptance here. I'm still getting used to this whole tablet thing, trying to find everything. So for 17-18, I believe, let's see if I get the numbers right here. Yep, got them. We're going to need a motion to approve. Sorry. Motion to accept the report of expenditures of the, see, this is what happens when you cut and paste, of the Board of Education for July 2018 for fiscal year 17-18.
You can't go off of there because it's got to go off the revised report that I handed you.
In the amount of
What?
$1,696,726.38. You didn't think I was going to pick that up, did you? So I would like to entertain that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second?
I think we discussed it enough, but without further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions, recusals? Okay. So I do know we have two different numbers we have to accept tonight. So now we can go to 18-19. Thank you, Bill. And would you like to go again?
Sure, why not? As you know, the total appropriations for 2018-19 are $59,497,175, and the total expenditures through July 31st in the 2018-19 school year $1,688,353.21, and there was a reimbursement of $3,160, so the actual amount is $1,685,193. The warrant, you'll notice, are quite large, $1,138,284.87, and that's primarily due to many annual payments in way of renewals, memberships, and dues. So as you look through the warrant, you'll notice some significantly large amounts, and for the most part, those are annual payments.
So, the one thing you may have noticed is that I slightly changed the format of the financial report.
Yes.
I deleted a column that was an unexpended balance that was kind of in the middle between expenditures and encumbrances that I thought was really kind of useless and just took up space. I also changed the reference at the end. So we used to have a comparison of what percentage we were expended this year to what expenditure we were at last year at the same time. Now I have what the actual expenditures for the same time period last year as a comparison to this year. I'm just trying to make the report easier to read. The Board of Ed had expressed some interest in having the different reference, so we're going to try it, and I'd be interested in hearing your opinion on the report as well.
The report that we received in our packets, and I might be wrong, I think the version, is it just me, or did the financials on 17-18 are also appearing under 18-19? So we don't have it on our tablets.
Yeah.
But we have the hard copy.
It's on there if you scroll further down. I just reloaded it.
You reloaded
for the
it,
meeting,
okay.
So if you want to exit out and go back in.
Okay.
But they're pretty
I thought I
good.
saw there was one document
Yeah.
updated, and that might have been it. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's great.
I was confused, too. I was
Yeah.
looking at the paper copy.
Okay, so we're good. So we've got the paper copy. I agree with it. When I was looking at the columns, the percent expended and encumbered for the year is one of the ones you took out. And I'd be more in favor of having that one. I totally get the whole not comparing to the percentage of last year, because the numbers go up and down. So the town has the same issue when we look at percentages. It's not fair to look at last year if your budget has gone up or down greatly. So seeing what the value of the total number against what we spent the year before on the actual dollar amount, I think is helpful. Seeing the percentage of this year expended, I do think helps to. I like that percentage. I can't speak for everybody else, but the percentage that's something that I've always looked at over time, but I've almost never looked at where it was last year.
Yeah, I would agree. I've had a lot of questions of that between
Yeah.
several.
It just gives you a good,
Choice.
just balance your 50% through the year, 6 months, okay, above or below
Definitely
by
got
a
it
lot
in
or a
and
little.
Yeah,
See
I gotta
what it
agree with our chairman, because the appropriations changed, from year to year, so the percentage seems to be a
But keep the
good gauge.
percentage, yeah, keep it the way you have with the actual, I like that.
You like that? Okay. And then I have
So,
another
anybody
column.
else have any
No, I agree.
comments? Before?
And next month I will have another column because we'll have expended through July 31st and then the current month. So I'll add 2 more columns in.
Okay.
We'll see how it looks.
So your net one down on the
Yeah.
columns.
It's a work in progress. Just trying to come up with something that's going to meet everybody's
Appreciate it, yeah.
needs.
Probably trying to save me from buying better readers.
No, actually, it's to save myself because I can't see it either.
It's pretty small.
I had one question, and it had to do, and it may have to do with the conversation we had before regarding tuition and some changes that are very recent. I did notice that the percentage was, having the percentages not here, it's somewhere in the 14 to 15% that was expended to tuition for the 1 month.
For the month.
And I'd probably rather have you comment on it, but does it have to do with the conversation before where there's some changes in the number of students, and so that affected that
No,
for
we
this month?
haven't seen the cost impact of those changes.
Okay.
What you see is a number of annual payments.
That are somewhat upfront?
Yeah, if you
Yeah,
look at
definitely.
when we look at the warrant, you'll see some that are for the entire fiscal year.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay, so it's really.
yeah,
an
Giant
upfront.
Steps would charges us for the entire year.
Oh, okay. That's good, because if you start, I looked at that and thought, there's no way that's
Yeah, if you look at it as
15%
a
sustainable throughout
monthly-
the entire year.
Yeah,
So
there's-
it's a blip in terms of the amount for
Right,
this.
there's some that they charge half year and a deposit, so you pay 55% maybe upfront, and then you pay the balance. So it's just the timing of those and how they bill for some of those big tuition.
Okay. Anybody else on 1819 warrants, minutes? anything at all? It is only 1 month, so we'll have lots of further discussions over the months, but. All right. I'm just scanning my documents, make sure I have anything. Okay, so if nothing further, I do have the amount right on this one. A motion to accept the reported expenditures of the Board of Education for July 2018 for fiscal year 18-19 in the amount of $1,688,353.21.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals?
Thank you.
Okay. Vince, thank you.
Thank you.
Linda, thank you. Bill, thank you. Item number 5, review and approve expenditures for town government. We will again look at fiscal year 17-18 first, and then we will look at 18-19 on the warrants only. And again, we will have two separate approvals. Okay. Fiscal year 17-18. Mary Jane, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm here to give you updated June 30, 18, where the town has landed. There are still some additional audit transfers that will need to be made in order to come up with final numbers, but these are as close as we have for right now. I'm going to start with expenses. Later on in the agenda, I have the transfers and in a transfer for some retro pay and the transfers for the year end. But this here is showing you what it looks like prior to those, so that you can see where we stand. Pretty much talked about every line item on here, anticipating their overages. Legal and fire department are the two that are the higher numbers. I just wanted to talk about the fire number really quick. If you look at this report, the overage looks to be $287,000, but as I said, later on in the agenda, we will have a transfer for the retro pay, approximately $85,000, which nets that overage to about $202,000, which is what you'll see on the transfer sheet. In this number is the first quarter of the SAFER grant. We are in the process of billing out for our 75%. We have that estimated number, and I have booked that as a receivable. It is already in this number. So this number represents 25% of the salaries for the new firemen, which is about $21,000. There's $51,000 worth of equipment and gear that was purchased for those firemen, which was presented as part of the presentation. And in the training line, there's another $17,000 excuse me, for those employees as well. The equipment, gear, and training not being reimbursable items for the grant, only salaries and benefits. So all the rest is just the regular overages for the fire department. So the town is showing $81,000 at the end of this report. After the transfer for the retro is made, it'll be a balance of about $140,000. So that's where we stand with expenditures at this point.
So in fire, there's really no surprise based on, we were expecting this with the...
Correct, we were certainly expecting...
Increases in the staff and, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So are those new firefighters serving right now? Are they all on board?
Yes.
How many do they have?
They are.
They are all on board,
Full
yep.
on board. The North Guilford Fire Station is now operations, expanded operation. So there are 2 firefighters on 3 shifts a day out of that facility. Firefighter, EMT, firefighter, paramedics.
We may not start seeing it yet, but will we? Have you heard lower overtime or replacement costs? Has there been a
Absolutely.
decline?
Well, I can tell you that I met with Deputy Chief Shove today, and they've had some real success stories with the fire department there in closer proximity to North Guilford. So,
Yeah, they had one two Saturdays ago that,
yeah,
because of the proximity, probably saved the gentleman's life.
correct, cardiac arrest.
To your question, Jeff, on replacement salaries, the supposition is that they're going to modify their staffing model so that they will always have a complement of 8. All right. Heretofore, if they had someone call out and they only had 7, they had to bring somebody in. So now, if they've got a call out, call out sick or something like that, they can staff with 7. They can move somebody. This is my understanding. They can move somebody from the downtown station up, or vice versa. Oh, no, they're not going to move anybody out up north. If somebody's missing from up north, they can move somebody up there. If somebody is missing from the southern or the headquarters location, they don't necessarily have to replace that individual because we've got the 2 in the north.
Great.
So there'll be. I think.
Is it a combined need?
Yes,
Curious?
that's
Okay.
my understanding. And I
Okay.
think we'll have some we should have some pretty robust discussions during the budget season because that number should come down. And that was one of the points that was made during the evaluation of utilizing the SAFER grant. However, one other point, the replacement salaries still are significantly over what we had budgeted for back in, what was it, January or February of 2017. So that 99,000, and what we had this discussion this morning, we were down a firefighter who was out on workers' compensation, so that requires that creates some pressure on that line item as well.
Okay. Did you, so we addressed fire, and then you mentioned legal also, and that's
Legal
basically
as-
labor contracts. That's really where
That is
that was.
considerable part of it.
I think I'm going to do it and ask about golf.
You can take over for Ken.
I'm going to do it. I think
Someone's
it's
gotta do
in
it.
honor of Ken. He-
In honor of
In honor of Ken.
But, seeing where we're at with golf again for another fiscal year, are we moving towards a decision to no longer have the pro?
Let's give it the full season, and we're going to evaluate it. And I think that was the determination we made. We're going to evaluate it the next budget cycle, which will be here
Okay.
before
We still don't
any
see
of
the
us
end of season
realize
numbers
it.
yet, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I have to mention this, only because I thought golf might come up, but my youngest son was here visiting, and we went to Guilford Lakes to play, and there was a gentleman standing there, and there was a big rope across it, and we pulled in and we said, sorry, the course is closed. The course is closed because of the amount of rain we have had. We all know, I mean, I've heard some things about this just being the soggiest, wettest summer in many, many years. And so the playing, I mean, this is not really on the expenditure side, this is more on the revenue side, but every golf course across the state of Connecticut going to New England has been really hurt by the amount of rain. So it's really unfortunate that golf is just one of those, it's a weather-related sport, and if you get a lot of rain, and it was sunny, by the way, when we showed up, but it had just been so soggy and so rainy that it just, after a while, the courses can't take that amount of rain. So,
well, you will see a corresponding drop theoretically in the water usage.
yeah,
Connecticut
I would
water
hope that there
companies.
is not an overage on the water. That's true, but I wanted to point that out because it's across the board. So, if anything, they're doing everything that they can there, but it seems to be every year there's a kind of a struggle with that, with the golf course. And this year it's the rain. A couple years ago was not enough rain.
So is maybe building department worth a few comments?
The building department, as I have noted before, is overdue to contracted services. On the revenue side, you'll see an increase in revenue. At the same time, about the same, we do contract for part-time assistants in our building department for large projects, and we've had a number of large construction projects on the commercial side. That person also did the school. That was a large project, but so the revenue offsets
Is it
the
about a wash
expense.
with the revenue?
Actually, I think there's more revenue than the expense.
Okay.
I mean, we can look at it when we get there.
That'll
Last
be
time
the
I
good
looked at,
news.
yeah, last time I looked at it was, I can't, so I,
I really hate to do this, but just going back to golf real quick, I did just notice that they basically were just slightly over budget on the expenditures. They met their. I look at this and they were 3,000 over their budget, so they were pretty well. They hit it. They went over a little bit, but so wanted to make that point. So. Anything else on expenditures 17, 18? I guess while we're on expenditures, warrants, and then we'll go to revenue.
all right.
On the weekly warrants, maybe somewhat of a dangerous question, but I'll ask it anyway. Under legal, there is about it's about the 9th line down, Halloran Stage, for about $5,000 assessment reval claims. At
Those are,
at
That's an
DDR.
assessment
those
appeal.
are revale appeal claims. It's one of the firms we're using now for to
Yeah.
handle those claims.
So it was an appeal that DDR had.
made, yes.
Okay.
Is that from last year or is that from this year? Because they got a 20% or 25% reduction in their property valuation. We sent them back a big refund check. Is that for that? Did they appealed again?
There's another appeal that came back in because of the revale. So, and Mary Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that DDR is just the first of all of the cases that they have? This is their bill from, I believe it was all of their the cases that have been assigned to Halloran and Sage.
I believe Halloran and Sage is covering all of them, if that is that.
Right, but that is not just DDR. DDR may have been the first on the list, and that's what you guys picked up?
I don't know that for certain.
Because
There
I
are
know,
others further on.
What's
I mean,
that?
there are other claims, and
There are other Halloran and Sage invoices further down the list.
I'm just curious with some of the expenses for Simon the dog, is there any chance of a pardon or has the final
Jonathan,
sentence
I'll give you
been-
the same answer I've given to the press. At this point, I will not comment on the specifics of the case. I will adhere to the advice of our counsel, who suggests that I do not, nor does the Board of Selectmen, have the authority to intervene in this matter, despite the contentions that are being made by the other party.
Understood.
And just as an update, the hearing was held last Wednesday.
Okay.
The hearing did not finish, so they are now scheduling another date for the balance of the evidence being presented and discussion. So, all right. And believe it or not, there's no one in this room who would like to see that case settled more than I. The significant amount of correspondence we're getting in the Selectman's office, and Tracy will back this up, smirk on her face. I will, however, say, for the record, that probably 95% of the correspondence and calls and emails and written letters we're getting are from people outside Guilford. It's rare that we get input from, direct input from a Guilford resident.
Special fund, weekly. The AM electric, second and third ones down. Electrical upgrades at Baldwin Cox, totaling about, I think it's about $315,000. Do you know by chance how much more we have left on that? What the total amount, I probably should know that, but
I don't
what
have
the
that with me.
bonded or budgeted amount was for that work. Just curious as to how many more those type of payments we'll be getting. But I know that A&M is going to finish their work this summer for the electrical upgrades, and it's quite a bit of work at Baldwin and Cox. So I just don't remember what the final number was for the budget. Anything else on warrants?
On the, were you just on the special fund week?
I was on special fund.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
A little further, there's an item for Castle Booze. Do we owe them any more for their research on the turf field, or are we all set with them?
I don't know whether they finished the,
That was $12,750. Is that the contract amount?
no, it was over 40,000,
It was
but
over, okay.
I think it's going to exceed that because of the testing of the materials that we put the materials through. So they're,
That'll be considered a reimbursement
Yeah.
to them. Yeah. Right.
And will they have any further role in the discussions about?
yeah, we will keep them until we have satisfied until we're satisfied that we have the appropriate outcome.
Okay.
And they will, if we go to litigation, they'll be our expert witnesses.
Okay. If nothing else on warrants or expenses, revenue?
Actually, I did have one.
Did you?
I'm just trying, on the
Sorry.
17, 18.
We can go. It's okay. We can go back to it.
Trying to find it. It was a motor on Graves Avenue. It was a small amount. It's like $340, but it was under Youth and Family Services. I just wasn't sure what it was.
Funds, or we on
That's what
It was on the.
regular?
This is on
Regular warrants,
the regular
yeah.
warrants page.
You're looking for the
I
highlighter.
know.
Regular warrants.
You have to
It's-
bookmark them. Got a little bookmark.
Yeah, I know. I'm learning this too. It was $694.01 for an installed new motor, 36 Graves Avenue. It's on page 13.
I'm suspecting it's coming out of something to do with either air conditioning or heating or some.
I actually looked that up because I must have had that same question. It was the AC unit.
It was basically a capital.
Excellent.
I wasn't sure myself. I really have no idea.
Thanks.
Revenues? Anything to bring more attention on revenues?
Not necessarily, although you can see that the building department is $65,000 over revenue projection on this end. We're showing at the end of the year right now $618,000. I had originally estimated somewhere in the around 600. It may be coming in a little bit higher than that. Once we do some additional budget auditing adjustments, we adjust for 60 days, and there's a lot of things that, so in the final analysis, it might actually be higher, but budgetarily, we stand at 618,000, which is just about where I had reported last month as well.
Yeah, it didn't look like there was much change from last month.
No.
Okay. And then medical.
Do we need to talk medical?
Well, no, I don't think we necessarily do.
We did end up, our catastrophic claims ended up at $1.47 million of covered, which gave us a savings of just under $200,000. As you reported, the projected surplus for this year is $106,000. Obviously, these numbers
Are reflective of
reflective
what
of
we
the
just
Board of
talked
Ed's decision. So for the year, we had a surplus of $106,000 and an estimated fund balance of $3.6 million at this point.
Can I go back for one moment to the revenue?
Sure.
I had a question about the finance department's interest income.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that it's improving, probably because of some of the steps you've been taking to earn higher interest.
Mm-hmm.
So budgeted 40,000, looks like actual is 130,500, which is great, right? Do you have a similar target now for this upcoming year?
Yeah, we raised it.
We did raise it. I can tell you that in July, even though our revenues came in mostly at the end of the year, we've brought in over $20,000 in interest for
Oh,
July.
additional. Okay.
Just in July.
So next year, do you think we'll reach some of the forecasts that, Ken had thrown out if we really push the money into the right place at the right time?
I would find it difficult to reach the $200,000 only because we do put out a lot of money up front for our large capital projects, and we bond after the fact. So, there is that to take into account. But we're certainly, our goal all along had been to do the best we can.
Okay,
So,
but 40 to 150 is definitely significant.
well, when we brought in 130, so that's why we were,
And we brought it to, it was 150, right?
150.
Yeah.
So it's certainly our
July
goal.
was only $20,000?
Yeah, well, because we really didn't get our money in until the very last week of July.
So August should be,
August should be higher. Of course, our money comes in and then we immediately have our bond payments, but, so we have a lot of expenses that go out. So hopefully August would be higher.
so I've asked for this before. Can we please have a sheet that tells us how much money we have in the STEEF funds? My understanding is that you're going to move a lot of money to the STEEF funds. I also
Correct.
believe that we should have close to $40-some-odd million now available to invest in that, which should yield a lot more than $20,000 a month.
We don't have $40 million.
Where's
that
the
we
money?
can put in. We have expenses.
I understand that. We just approved the expenses,
Right.
but we take in $45 million in by August 1st. You take in $45 million. In addition to that, we've got over $10 million sitting in the various accounts. So that gets us up to $55 million. Now you can take out the warrants that we just approved, and you still have well over $40 million. So my question, and what I'd like to see is I'd like to know where the money is.
Absolutely.
Because I think
The warrants you just approved were from 2017, 2018.
we just did
fiscal
July,
year.
too.
Not yet.
You have-
Well, that's what we're looking at,
Yeah.
but there's not,
Right.
but we, to my point,
I completely understand, and Mary Jane actually has a schedule that shows what we have for available cash. And I think she just mentioned we make our pension contributions in the first month.
yeah,
And what's our total outlay for July? It's in the order of $7 or $8 million, plus the debt pay, the pension contributions. And how much did we? What's the number, Mary Jane? About 80% of our tax revenues come in within the last 10 days before August 1st.
before August 1st, right?
Yeah. So the money.
So August should be,
August
should be a bit, that should be the highest, the biggest one of the year.
Exactly. Exactly. So we'll get you. I think you had that report for him. Some cash flow analysis. A couple. Was it last one?
I never saw it, so anyway, I know we've talked about it, I just haven't seen it.
They probably think we're beating a dead horse, but I think he's got a long way to run with trying to get some more interest in that.
And we're all on the same page. We all want that. So we're doing what we can.
We all need to come to a baseline understanding of exactly how much we have available. And Ken, to your point, that document will give us that data. So.
If there's nothing else on 17, 18, sounds like we're segueing
We-
to 19, so we might as well go through and go through our approval here. I typed this all out to make sure I understood it correctly, right? So we approved, we're basically approving a net amount, right, the difference.
Correct.
So we approved $2,552,201 last month. And we have updated expenditures for fiscal year 17-18 in July that we just reviewed for $3,080,000 and $276. $3,080,276. So what we would need a motion for to approve the report of expenditures for the town in July 2018 for this fiscal year would be a net amount of $528,075. I'll put that in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, recusals? Okay. Now we can move to 18-19, and we're just, we don't have our, we don't have the reports we typically get because really it's early in the year. We're just talking about the
We'll have
warrants.
July
at
and
this point.
August next month. Mhm.
Right. Just to make sure I have the amount, is it the 4 million number? 4,121,000?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make sure I have the right number when we go to the motions. Questions on the warrant, special fund? Well, actually, anything on the warrant, because that's all we're approving. I don't think I have anything. I have to admit, this tablet thing, I'm getting used to it, but the hardest part is seeing it, because I'm nearsighted, so I have to go like this to see the tablet, and like, go like this to be able to see it. Okay.
Put on your laptop.
Time for my focus. Time to go see
Not
your
a bad idea.
Time to go see
Either
your
that or just take the glasses off and just everybody else is blurry in the room, so.
You can log into BoardPack on
Yeah, you need a
anything.
device.
Yeah. I do like this though. So, all right, anything? No. Yeah.
We can't help you there.
All right, yep, we're all set, I guess. No questions on warrants. So, I'd like to hear a motion or put in form a motion to approve the report of warrants of the town, July 2018 for fiscal year 18-19 in the amount of $4,121,933.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Okay. Thank you, Mary Jane. I have a feeling that you might want to stick around. Right? So, item number 6, discuss and take possible action on end-of-year transfers to close out fiscal year 17-18. The first item was a memo from Mary Jane. I will only read excerpts. So this was to the members, were to the members of Board of Selectmen and Finance, August 10th of this year, negotiated salary transfer fiscal year 17-18. Basically, it's the Guilford Firefighters International Association of Firefighters settled its labor contract with the town of Guilford on June 29th, 2018. Retroactive pay for fiscal year 17-18 was paid on July 20th, 2018 and posted back to their proper line items in fiscal year 2017-18. There's a breakdown allocation of full-time, overtime, and replacement salaries that adds up to $84,605. And the funding for the negotiation was currently being held in fund balance assigned reserved for personnel. It appears that from the memo that is in front of us that we received tonight, the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to transfer $84,605 from reserve for personnel to the salary accounts as outlined by the finance director based on what I just read in the memo. So I guess I'd like to put in the form of a motion that the Board of Finance approve a total transfer of $84,605 as well from fund balance assigned reserve for personnel into the appropriate line items.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. And then the next one is the transfers for the fiscal year. I have to be honest, Matt, I don't know if you ever read these out in detail, but I was not about to do that. So we have departments that we transferred to that included legal, building department, assessor, natural resources, golf, fire, and revaluation at varying amounts. And those transfers came from insurance, employee benefits, library, engineering, and public works, parks and recreation, police, and selectmen. And the total amount of transfer was $407,320. Again, the Board of Selectmen took the action this morning to unanimously approve that amount, $407,320 in department transfers as outlined. I'd like to put that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. That takes care of item number 6. Mary Jane, thank you, as always. Number 7, committee reports. Oh, sure, go ahead. Yeah.
One other thing.
Yes?
So I did an analysis of the a 5-year history and projected unassigned fund balance for the end of the year. Copies here.
Thank you.
Matt may want to speak to this. We've been talking about the possibility of using some of the unassigned fund balance for one-time large projects or items we know that are coming forward. This is just a quick look at where we may end the year. Do you need another one?
One more for Megan whenever you...
Yep. Specifically based on the numbers that I presented today. Maybe this one for Ken.
Yeah, I'll get it.
Sorry.
I'll get it to Ken. No, it's okay. I'll get it
Sorry.
to Ken.
Specifically on the numbers, the $600,000 estimate for year-end for June 30, 2018, conservative estimate on these papers. So if we look to where we were 2017, and then add the $600,000 in, that's where the 2018 estimate comes in, bringing our percent of operating revenue up to 10.5. I'll just note I use operating revenue because that is how the policy that the boards of selectmen and the Board of Finance measured this number, operating revenue. So what we've been talking about is bringing us down to where the fiscal 16 level is, purely an arbitrary number that we've been looking at this point, which was 9.1% of operating revenue, which if you apply that leaves $1.3 million available for use. Whatever your number comes up with, that's good.
Not for recurring revenue, John. Not for recurring expenses.
So over on the left-hand side, there is a list of items that the selectmen have been discussing, just putting on a table at this point, some possible areas that could be used for, this money could be used for. So this is really just for information purposes today. Obviously.
These items should not be a surprise. We've talked about these at previous meetings through the year. Reval, I think, is a new one. We currently use Reval in our operating budget. There's an opportunity to pull that out of the operating budget and fully fund it from the 5-year plan from unfunded.
Since we budget for it every year, and then we take that money, we put it into an assigned fund balance anyway. That again is just an option.
It's not really reoccurring.
It's not my decision, so it's up to you.
Perspective.
It's been reoccurring for every year for quite some time. The transportation plan is the Guilford Safe Streets Mobility Task Force, which we will be officially kicking off in September. We may need opportunities to hire a facilitator and/or consultants to help us with that plan. That is the update of the 2002 transportation plan, as well as putting a plan together to deal with the 5 petitions we had for various sidewalks around town and the community. It's an initiative that we will be launching officially in September, and I'd like to be able to assign some funds to that, as I said, for either facilitator consultants or demonstration projects to get out of it. Technology, you've heard, you guys are familiar with the study that's going on with Bloom Shapiro. Evaluating the appropriate use of technology in our land use departments. We should have that recommendation coming out within the next 3 weeks. Additionally, there's another initiative going on between Mary Jane, the town hall and employees, as well as the police and fire, because there are 3 entities that expend funds and need support on technology. Prior to us entering into any discussions with the Board of Education on potential synergies with them, we want to get our ducks in a row and figure out what that structure should look like, and also where we may need to put some money. OPEB is the other post-employment benefits. That's a liability that we will all be facing. I think some of you may recall over the last couple of years, the Government Accounting Standards Board modified the way that those need to be reported. They're now included in our audit. So those are medical benefits for retirees, for certain classes of retirees. That's not a large percentage, but it is a liability we have. It has long been anticipated that we would use pay-as-you-go for that. when those occur, but those are future liabilities, similar to what our pension fund is. So there's been some discussion about establishing an OPEB trust.
Matt, do we have any idea what numbers we're talking about?
On the transportation plan, I'm looking for at least $300,000. On technology, probably 100 to 150, somewhere in that neighborhood. It'll be largely dependent on what we see from Bloom Shapiro. Actually, we modified the ask of Bloom Shapiro. We use the technology. We've got various technologies. One, our primary software system is Munis, which is, at its essence, it's a financial reporting tool, but they have built modules off of it, including a permitting module, which I've come to understand was never implemented properly, and we're not actually using with any efficacy. So the question there is, do we continue to invest in training and modifications to that system, or do we look at a software package that currently is being utilized by the fire department and the police department for emergency services? It's called VOC. It manages we use it for emergency management stuff. The fire department is using it for inventory management, daily task assignments. It's a pretty robust tool. Mike Shove, the assistant chief, has been virtually a development partner with VOC. VOC was formed by a couple of former GE IT specialists. It's a pretty slick package, so we're looking at possibly expanding the use of that because they have modules similar to plug-and-play modules, including one for permitting. So, and the user experience with VOC seems to be far more acceptable than the user experience with the Munis system. Again, in fairness to the employees, I'm not sure that the implementation, the mapping of processes from manual to electronic was ever done in a comprehensive manner, and I don't think they received the training and support they needed to make it work. So again, right now, at least 300,000 on the transportation plan and 100 to 150 on the technology plan. And I want to go back to the point we made earlier, that I made earlier. Had we had some collaborative discussions, could very well have been the 200,000 that the town made in its last payment to the healthcare account could have been diverted into one of these accounts as well. So we would look in two places for your consideration, and we'll be bringing something to you in September formally, either moving it from unfunded, unassigned fund balance and or from the medical account.
What's the total amount on the reval now? I know we're budgeting a certain amount every year.
250, so 280.
The last reval was 225, so.
We've been using 250. We've been basically putting 50,000 in per year.
So that's every 5. That's every 5 years, 250.
Right. And clearly, that's something we could do. But we're going, 4 years from now, we'll start the process again.
And that figure's for the reval company, or is that for the reval company plus legal?
Just the reval company.
Just the reval company.
Just a we budget additional money in the legal line for
Okay.
the appeals.
Okay.
And our next reval will be physical. Is that correct? A physical reval?
so.
I think we just went through a statistical. Yeah, right? So it'll be the.
It'll be a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
You left public safety? Did you? That was one of the line items there too, public safety.
Yeah, we have yet to determine exactly what those needs are, but their public safety could be buying fire trucks, could be buying equipment, that kind of thing.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your consideration. Oh, one last thing.
Oh, how do you
go to new business?
Yes, we can. Yeah. But before we get off this stuff, you said September. Are you going to? We'll put something on the agenda. You'll have a memo. Somehow you'll get it.
We'll get to it.
I know you'll communicate it. I'm just wondering in what format it'll be communicated. So
we'll
know.
Be happy to do that.
Great. Thank you. As my tablet shuts off, I should know that the next item on the agenda is committee reports. Number 7, Veronica. Building Permit Review Committee.
We're still working, and in fact, we have another subcommittee meeting this week, so we're moving along, and we'll have a recommendation before too long.
Great. Thank you. Item number 8, old business. Number 9, new business. Yes.
As you're probably aware, we went out to the bond market 2 weeks ago. I want to commend Mary Jane and her staff for pulling together an extensive amount of information in a very short window so that we could meet going to the market in August. We went out for $12 million in bonds and $3 million in bands. I participated in ratings calls with S&P and with Fitch. Both calls went very well. The result of those calls and the submission of our documentation resulted in our maintaining a AAA bond rating with a positive outlook. The only change was in the short term, in the bands, and we moved to SF +1, whatever.
The highest rating possible.
Highest rating possible on the short term. So, and the savings, the anticipated savings as a result was
$140,000.
we also picked up some premiums, so another $400,000 in premiums on the bonds as well. So, and the market price was pretty good. Our IBIC, who's our advisor, was looking at in the high two nines to 3. We came in at 2.92, and I think which by the way is higher than last year, which we were, 2.5?
But we expected that.
But we expected it because the Fed has moved the rate twice since that time, and then the bands came in lower than anticipated as well.
Thank you. Job well done. On top of that, not necessarily new business, but I would just add that, with all the auditor information that you had to put together too, it was a busy summer. Usually always is, but
It's always busy.
yeah, exactly. I should raise that I briefly spoke to Mary Jane, kind of passing in the hall, about the auditor RFP that we said that we were going to look at. I think we're a couple months away from that, but I just want to let you all know that it is on my radar to have an RFP that we can look at to possibly go out for the auditing. So, but we're a little early yet. I think we're probably looking at October, November to look at the draft and get it out in January. Am I right in that interpretation?
Yeah, January.
Great.
January's
Okay. Okay, public forum. I think we're all set. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.